every single company needs to standardize the cadence of the organization. That recalibration of the engine. Don't let engines run for 3 and 4 months and then go, oh man, why did we fall off track? Why is there so much chaos?
Let's get into it, guys. My guest today is Jessica Odell, a dear friend of mine, and we are going to be discussing all things operations. So without further ado, Jess, welcome to the Undeniable Podcast.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
I have said something along the lines of businesses don't fail, people do.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
I think that's true. But I want to refine a little bit. And most businesses don't fail because the vision is bad. They fail because the vision never survives contact with reality. And visionaries, when they look at their plan, it's all just going to work out. And some of them may have contingencies, whatever, right? Jess, your background is actually in intelligence,
Yes.
and in operations, where vision kind of has to meet execution, where that rubber meets the road. And can I ask, what usually breaks first?
So I think it's both, and here's why. I think sometimes founders get wrapped around a solution without properly framing the problem. A lot of people start businesses because they want to start or solve a problem. But then they see some shiny object and they'll say, that's going to solve my problem, or that's going to solve a problem. I'm going to build a business around this solution. But they didn't quite frame the problem correctly to where that can be articulated and executed all the way down to the lowest level, so to speak. So I think if a problem is improperly framed and can't be communicated, then it's already setting up to fail. You're gonna put people, energy, effort, finances, everything into this problem or into this business, and your folks can execute that perfectly to the T.
Right.
But they focused on the wrong problem. So it was already set up to fail in some sense, in case.
Right.
But then on the backside, okay, let's say that visionary did articulate everything and they had a great problem to solve. Then it becomes a communication issue and a company culture issue. So communication and culture. If there's cancers within the organization, so to speak, morale isn't there, or folks just aren't communicating and building their staff, they just don't understand the vision.
One of the things that I think is probably the most important thing is you don't get execution without vision.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
And I believe the vision has to be well thought out, but you can't live there because it becomes very fairy tale like.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. You have to have somebody execute, implement.
You really do, because if you listen to a visionary, you have to learn to differentiate when he's dreaming and when he's actually planning. Often I will be talking about dreams and it sounds like plans. So when you're dealing with that visionary as an operational person, as sort of an integrator, if you will, how do you get them sort of focused in where not everything is Willy Wonka's chocolate factory?
Yeah, because yes, it obviously you want to give that founder the freedom, right, to explore different visions. But I usually wait a day, 2 days, and then come back into the office and go, so hey, that conversation we had the other day where you were talking about this, is that something you still want to pursue? Do you want us to start looking at what resources it would take to do that? Because then I could go back to the rest of the staff and we could map that out and plan it. But giving that sizzle and whatnot time to wear off, to where, he or she has come down from that dreamland, I think is what helps. So don't immediately execute, but follow up.
So one of the downsides of being being a visionary is they tend to be impetuous, right? They tend to not really get the plan down. And one of the things they forget to do is research or gather intelligence about what they're thinking about. So
Yes.
I want you to talk a little bit when you talk about intelligence. I mean, most people think like the CIA, or
Yeah, secret
they're
squirrel
thinking,
stuff.
that in yeah, right, the something that comes out of a Clancy novel, if you will, right? So how do you take that military idea that everybody has and just quietly start using the same concept, obviously, right? Because everything has its intelligence that you have to gather. So how do you have a process for that, and how do you kind of push through and use that, and what does it mean sort of in the non-military context in the real world? So
So in a non-military language, it is what I call decision grade clarity. So information in and of itself may provide clarity on a topic. You may go, "Oh, okay, now I have more understanding of that particular topic than I had before." Whereas intelligence feeds decision points. If this gets answered and it's a yes, I take the company this direction. If this gets answered and it's a no, I need to take the company in this direction. Forming your intelligence and your gathering of information to specific decision points. So you're analyzing the information, you're synthesizing it, you're putting against those decision points. That's what makes it intelligence. Information is just information. Intelligence is information that's been processed in a meaningful way.
how do you circle around all of the biases that are out there? Like, how do I not go look for the answer I'm looking for? Does
Ooh,
that make
it's tough.
sense?
Oh
You know
yeah.
what I mean? Like,
The-
we can get into confirmation biases that they
right.
do during investigations. We can get into an anchoring bias that I've already made my mind up
Oh yeah.
about what I want it to be, and so I'm just going to go find things that sort of support. Well, that's a confirmation bias, but you already believe this thing about whatever. I'm just going to throw an example so our listeners kind of get it. An anchoring bias is that Jesus died on the cross for our sins.
Hmm.
Right. So I'm going to make decisions based on that. They were not at the cross. They have seen no evidence from the cross. They've not been to the tomb. And some people have, clearly, but I don't want to overwork the analogy here. What I'm saying is that there are certain things that you're just not going to talk people out of, and
Right.
you can't do that in your role, right? And so, how do you work around those biases? What are those checkpoints when you get into things?
Well, and I think it depends on when a COO and CEO are running companies together. It goes to that mutual respect. I mean, obviously, if somebody brings me in as a COO, they're relying on me to reel them in and to expose those biases and then get back to the plan. You always have an annual plan, quarterly plan, monthly plan, even weekly to some
Mhm.
extent. But
Sure.
does it go back to that annual plan? Does it accomplish the OKRs, which are those objectives and key results that you said you wanted by the end of the year? If the
Mhm.
answer is no, I'm gonna be like, boss, I'm sorry.
Let me ask that. So,
Yeah,
just, and I don't want to get too specific here, but when you talk, was it, the OKRs? Is that what
OKRs
OKRs? Okay, so the OKRs, objectives and
and
key
key results.
results.
Yes.
If you were to ask me that,
Hmm.
I get into dreams.
Which is fine.
So how do you kind of redirect them? Because I guess what I'm asking is what do founders think they know in that objective and key results space, but really don't? Like,
I'll,
they're just they because we think everything works out.
yes, yes. And so I think founders ask a lot of their staff, "Can we do this?
Mhm.
I've got this dream. Can we do it?"
Smart ones do,
Yeah.
I think.
Yes, and but the operators will ask, "Okay, but what under what conditions can we do this? What does success look like? Who owns the eaches of that dream?" Because sometimes founders would just say, "Hey, we're all one big team. Let's all just go after this dream of mine." And it's like, "Okay, you still have to designate roles, responsibilities, who's in charge of what and whatever for accountability purposes and for basically for what we call in the military troops to task. You look at how many people you have, the talent, the capacity, all those things, who's in charge of what, so that this whole ship moves forward.
Mhm.
It's not just a let's all go. It's all right, you're on tap for this, you're on tap for that. But founders don't think of that. They just were like, I don't know, can we do this? I want to make it happen. So it's really that operator that goes, okay, cool. Let's look at the conditions we're given. Can we do this? Let's look at all that, and then who's playing what role within this, and
Well,
how are we going to measure it?
how often do you run into a founder like when it comes to human capital investment, right? Um, Using, for lack of a better term, them as a catch-all. Oh, well, Sarah can handle this, and we'll just get Joe to kind of do this on top of it. And you're looking there. So how do you redirect and determine all of that kind of stuff? Because it's like they very well may be good at it.
Right, right, and
That
that
may be the best person. It's like, what are we going to take off their plate
right,
so that they can focus on this, right? And when you over diversify a person, they lose passion for all of it,
right,
right?
or they don't become really, really
That's what I would
surgical at
worry
one.
about. That's what
Yes,
would be one of my concerns.
and it
So,
absolutely happens. And I know there's a lot of books out there right now on small business and founders and COOs, and there's a lot of negativity around the org chart. I don't know if you're familiar with the org chart. This is okay. This is the COO or
of
CEO. This is
course
the
I am,
COO.
but just in case somebody else isn't.
Yeah. So, the org chart, organizational chart that says, all right, this is the CEO, he's the boss. Next is the COO, chief of ops, operating officer. Usually the chief financial officer is right next to that, and maybe even a chief strategic officer. And then under that, you've got your HR, your operations, your logistics, you kind of, it's more of a function,
Uh-huh.
but there's a little bit of negativity out there right now on giving titles to people. And I keep saying this, that is one thing that the military is amazing at. You're not getting titles because you get to pound your chest and you get all this authority. No, with that authority comes a crap load of responsibility.
Uh-huh.
You have a left and right limit. This is what you're in charge of. This is your lane. And if anything screws up within this lane, guess who they're coming to? That's the purpose of an org chart. That's the purpose of these titles. It says that, if it's a director or a chief or a something, it's already telling people this person has been qualified at this level of decision making
Well,
and
see,
responsibility.
that's not a title though. That's a role.
Right.
And the role may have a title to it, and I'm not trying to play semantics here with you,
Sure.
but one of the things that I think we get away from often, and operationally speaking, I think it becomes problematic when you start handing out titles to incentivize people to fill a role as opposed to them filling a role and realizing that's what they're doing.
Right. Right. You definitely want to tailor, okay, what are this person's strengths and weaknesses? And maybe can we shift a couple different tasks that maybe they're not good at, but Bob over here is really good at. So it is more of a role. And so a chart kind of gives that visual alignment and where one department ends and the next responsibility begins, because that helps people go. It prevents I thought you had that. Well, but I thought that was you. I thought you were no.
Well, you're the such and such and such and such.
Exactly.
That's the problem with titles, right? Is because they're subjective, and if they're used to incentivize behavior rather
Hmm.
than be reflective of behavior, I think I have always found that to be problematic,
Right.
right? They become the head of whatever. You're the chief this,
Right.
you're the lead parking lot attendant,
Right.
right? It was just a guy that liked to park cars and just wanted to help people out and make sure that they help the flow of traffic because they were
Right.
nice. And then they called him the lead parking lot attendant, and all of a sudden he's like, "You'll park where I say you park, when I say you park, for how long you park, and when you're done parking, you're going to have to check with me so I can get you out of that parking place and get the next person in." And they just become inflamed or
Hmm.
engorged by this title thing,
Right.
where it becomes like a power struggle deal,
Right.
right? And they want then there's dominion and all of this kind of, as opposed to you leave it at a role. This is your role as parking lot attendant. You know what? This is your role, because military doesn't have fancy stuff other than general, right? And even general is not really flashy. Do you know what I mean? It's very, that's one of the things I know even about the military rank or any of their MOSs. It's just not a flashy thing. It
Right.
almost
Yeah, like for example, in most military units, and I'll just use like a brigade, for example. So in a brigade combat team, you'd have the brigade commander, which would be equivalent to an organization's CEO. You would have your executive officer, and your brigade S3. They kind of share similar COO type duties.
mhm,
But then you have S1 or G1, whatever is HR type activities.
yeah.
The two, which I was the S2, G2 for a long time. That's all intel. And then you have the 3, which is ops. The 4 is logistics. The 5
Yeah,
is
right. Yeah.
is IT.
I mean, that
So
seems, but it
so it's a
seems so
role,
intuitive.
but within the role,
Uh-huh.
that directory or whatever, you still had director of intelligence, and you still
Uh-huh.
had the second in command of that, which was my senior NCO. And then we'd have the analysts in their little roles, SIGINT, IMINT, all the different intelligence disciplines under.
But there's a lot of accountability that exists there.
That's what I'm getting at is
Right.
people say titles, people get wrapped around titles saying, oh, it gives somebody this inflated sense of power and they abuse it, which is true. People do that.
Mhm.
But the leader above that should be counseling and developing that person under them to say, it's not power, it's responsibility over those people you serve. And so you take it away from you people serve me to no, you're a leader that serves them.
Right.
And so that I think that's all
Like
it
serve it.
takes.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
But usually
that's the.
it's that title, that person that's in that seat
Mhm.
that gets the opportunity because of the nature of their title to do that. You see what I mean? So it's
Uh-huh.
like the director of intelligence, I oversee everybody under my watch. It's on me to develop them professionally
So that you're getting the
so that
intel.
it's
Yeah.
coming back
Right.
up.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
That way. Yeah. Because
Yes.
you're fortifying the pipeline, so to speak, is what that would sound like to me. And I mean, it's very clear how that works. And most of all, it makes sense.
I would think of the two, role, title. Role is absolutely most important. You can call it what you want to call it, but make your chart that's,
Mhm.
who's who and where and who answers to who. Because who answers to who also is, well, who helps develop who?
So operationally, is that one of the things that you kind of try to focus on? Is I hate to use anything else other than job description, right?
Hmm.
I don't want to be, euphemistic about, like, we need to be clear about what this job or this role
100%.
does.
Yes. With flexibility, obviously. Certain roles I think require a little bit more flexibility, but
Hmm.
for the most part, there should always be a left and right limit to somebody's role.
Well, when flexibility becomes fluidity, I think it might be
Right.
problematic. And how do you make sure that it kind of you kind of stay in a colloidal state there?
So I think not standardizing everything. So
Okay.
standardize, I
Little
think,
artistic license maybe
yes,
somewhere. Yeah.
a little government self-reflection.
Right. You
But
lead one way, I lead another
right.
way. I follow one way. Yeah.
I think what should always be standardized across every single organization, it doesn't matter if you sell toilet paper, if you sell cars, if you're Elon Musk, it doesn't matter. Every single company needs to standardize the cadence of the organization.
Wow.
What
Talk
I'm
a little bit about that. What do you mean by
So
cadence?
cadence, it's like, are we having a weekly meeting? Maybe it's every 2 weeks we have a meeting. But that recalibration of the engine. Don't let engines run for 3 and 4 months and then go, oh man, why did we fall off track? Why is there so much chaos? Nope. One weekly, it could be 30 minutes every week. It could be 1 hour every week. I cannot tell you how nobody likes to go to meetings. I'm there with you. Nobody loves, I was like, oh yes, my weekly meeting. But
Visionaries love meetings.
if it's run correctly, there's already a standardized agenda. Everybody knows what they're supposed to show up to the meeting with.
Hmm.
It's not just show up, but it's show up with your information from your foxhole. I mean, I hate to keep using military terms, but from where you live, you're bringing this to the table every week so that we all calibrate. And so that's kind of a cadence. Is, do we have a weekly meeting? Do we have one every 2 weeks? Internal to the departments, are they having an every morning sync meeting? Is it one in the morning and maybe a 15-minute at the end of the day? Like, it's kind of that cadence.
So I've got a true or false question for you, and then there's going to kind of be a follow-up question that kind of comes after that. So I just want to I want to make sure kind of what's going to happen. So true or false? Founders are flying with instruments that they don't really know how to read.
I I think it's probably true for the most part,
Hmm.
especially if the organization's tech heavy.
Uh-huh.
It's tech is moving so fast.
Right.
AI
Yep.
is moving so fast.
Uh-huh.
I mean, even the AI experts aren't even to keep up. How do we expect the founders who are trying to incorporate AI into their companies to be able to keep up? But I also know that there are plenty of founders who are reaching down into their staffs and their direct and asking those questions.
So, do you think it's operationally important that that you and because if you're my COO, for example, right? There's a level of equality there, right?
Yes.
I mean, we're
Yes.
talking about different roles at this point in
Right.
time, both equally kind of important. Buck's got to stop somewhere, right?
Right.
We've got to have somebody in
Yep.
charge,
CEO's tiebreaker.
right? CEO, that kind of thing.
Yes.
But when that operational guy comes in there, they're coming in there with a role that is not the CEO's role. It's just the CEO is the first guy that the CEO is the first guy that gets blamed. I kind of look at it like that.
Hmm.
So how do you, when you're working with that founder, that visionary, that CEO, whatever you want to say,
Hmm.
make sure that maybe you're distilling the information because they're looking at instruments like, for example, you need to check your altimeter. Okay, it says 9. Okay, what that means is this,
Right.
right? This gauge is going to tell you this kind of thing, not necessarily how it works, why it works, everything that goes into it.
Right.
Is that something that you seek to do, and how do you
All the
work
time.
through that with them? Is that an ongoing thing? Is that part of your cadence, so to speak?
It's all the time. It's always providing the founder with the so what. He doesn't have to know, like even when I was leading
Providing the
Intel
founder with the so
professionals.
what. I like that.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I want to know.
it's
Yeah.
yep. It's boss says I want to know this. You say, hey, I just got some report that says this. Here's the so what. You always, always, always give a founder a so what to the information. And that just came from 15 years of doing this in the military, standing before people with way more rank than me. And I'm just sitting there giving my little intel brief. And they're like, give me the so what.
I want to give the audience a little sort of insight about who Jessica is. She will talk to you. I mean, she has no problem talking to you. But I will say this: the lady is not going to use 10 words where 5 will do. You know, I am the guy, if 10 words will get the communication across, I am going to give you an entire, multiple volumes of how to get something,
Dissertation.
right? I anyway, I think that that's really kind of the so what, and I mean that's why you are the way that you are. I mean,
Yes.
do you find the operational role for you to be natural, so to speak, or come out of a place of gifting, and what is that core thing in you that makes you feel like it's so valid and important?
I think growing up is the social butterfly. I didn't have any one specific, group of friends, type of friends. I mean, even to the gentlemen that I've, dated over the years, everybody was, you know, I was all over the place. I understood different personalities. I understand different same thing, in the military. With the roles that I was in, I was in everything, everywhere. It's like a beehive, right? There's a scout bee in a beehive. Okay. They or a bee colony. They go through and they map out everything before they start leaving their little pheromone, trails or whatnot for the rest of the colony. So that I think just having that internal drive or that internal, I guess it's just a personality trait, is one to want to be everywhere and know everything, just that natural desire to learn everything. And then you know, people skills, obviously, learning how to talk to so many different backgrounds. I think that kind of just grew up a military brat, so
Yeah.
I was pretty
Well,
much forced to do
yeah,
that.
yeah, kind of
And
a
then again,
predisposition there,
yeah, I was
right? Yeah.
already kind of predisposition. We moved almost every year. I was always the new kid, so I always came into, new schools and was a new kid, whatever. But with other military kids, it was like, it's just not a big deal. So having friends, kids of all different backgrounds. And then, of course, just understanding plans, understanding how to think. So you have the visionary, he just says what he wants done. But to turn around and say, okay, now I got what he wants or she wants, how do I actually put that into motion? That desire to want to put somebody else's vision into motion, I think has to be innate too. I don't want to ever be a CEO. Never. That's just not, I'm not built for that. So I think finding those people that say, I'm capable of being a CEO. I just don't have the desire.
So do you feel like you would want to be in the room sort of with the visionary as the initial decisions are getting
Oh,
made.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I think
Yes.
that that's the important
Yes.
part of intelligence, right? The
It,
more the closer to the origin you can be, the better off you are, kind of
and
right?
and it's not just the intelligence part of it. It's living and breathing across the whole company. HR, logistics, IT. You live in all of the spaces because a good COO type will know everybody's pain points. And again, it goes back to servitude. It's not a boss type thing, pound my chest, everybody answers to me. No, that COO serves the eaches. Well, the only way to serve them in a way that's meaningful to them is get to know what goes on in their little directory, what goes on in their role, what goes on in their role, what are the pain points within the role, and then what cross coordination needs to happen to ensure everybody's rowing the boat in the same direction.
Right. So when you have fewer rowers and you've got somebody that maybe doesn't have a large organization, right? But
Uh-huh.
they may have aspirations. That may be that thing at the end of the year with the three letters that I don't remember what it is.
OKRs. Them things.
Those things there at the end of the year,
Yeah.
right? That I
Yeah.
should be looking at right now. Have I achieved those things? And the funny thing is yeah, at a level, but I don't think it was intentional. I think it was by luck,
Hmm.
and I think it was by a lot of pain and a lot of learning in the moment kind of thing. And that pain being a fantastic teacher. There is not a
Hmm.
better teacher in the world than
The
than
pain.
pain, right?
Right?
And I
Yes.
mean, it will make you remember some shit you never thought you could. You
Right.
know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, I remember that. I'm not going to do that again. And that happens to all of us, right? And when that guy that there's not a lot of logistics to look at. And I think what you have is a lot of success in the area that the individual is probably either most gifted or most interested.
Hmm.
Those aren't always the same thing.
Right.
Whether the most gifted or the most interested, they spend a lot of time there. Lots of other things suffer. So it's like a fractional COO working with that guy that's trying to break through that glass ceiling. Because when you want to go from having a business, from having your own job to having a business, right? Owning your own job to having an actual business,
Hmm.
infrastructure there is key, right? When you begin to build um, something so that it's scalable at a level. I'm not
Hmm.
talking about trying to take something from the bootstraps to a $40 billion that's not what I mean. What I'm talking about is an actual real life functioning, living and breathing business, not just a place to go execute on your trade.
Hmm.
Right. Okay. So having set all of that up, I'm exhausted now. Where things usually fail most commonly, and this is more about execution and where it breaks, is it usually before decisions are made or kind of after decisions are made?
Kind of earlier in the conversation, earlier in the podcast, we were talking about how sometimes they don't frame the problem correctly,
Uh
or they
huh.
make the wrong decision. And even though they've set, this is what I want for my vision, now you've set everybody in a wrong direction. Or on the flip side, it's just getting communicated down to the lowest level. If I had to pick one over the other, the one that I've experienced the most is actually the first. It's
Okay.
before.
Before decisions are made.
Before decisions are made. And it at least in the, construction and restoration
Well, I think
industry,
it's key to intelligence. It's sort of like I'm going to, it's like
you're looking in the wrong area.
you're looking in the wrong
So
area,
you
right?
miss the whole target.
Yeah, right.
Yes. Yes.
Exactly. That's kind of that's sort of where I was kind of
Yes.
drifting towards or whatever.
Yep.
That's kind of what I think. And I think decisions aren't where it breaks is assumptions are made
Yes. Yes.
rather than decisions, so to
Yep.
speak. I think assumptions are made. So do you think that that is a people issue or do you think that that is a sequencing issue?
From what I've observed the most in terms of frequency, people, believe it or not, it's people.
Hmm.
And I say that because sometimes stories within a company are masked as data. They think there's this metric but then when you really dig down into it, you find out that there's some personal things going on here, and some Bob, and you find out so and so sleeping with so and so and whatever, and it's causing problems, and they're but the metric that gets reported all the way up, it's like, hey, there's a problem. Well, unless you stop and slow down and look at what's really going on with your people, It may not be the number or the system or the software or the whatever. We need better software. We need better this. No, you probably just need to find out what's going on with your people. So I would say any major any problem really that shows up in a company, first look at your people.
Okay, I think that that's really great advice. I mean,
Yeah.
because that lands with me in a lot because I think one of the things that you said earlier had to do with is it doable generally has to do with do we have the bodies that we can throw at this thing
Right.
to make it happen. And I mean, and if you are a small business guy, do you have the outsourcing capability? Like, for example, I run a business and I do some inspections, but I can't do all of the inspections that I
Right.
have to go do. My good friend Andrew handles a lot of my roof inspections. For example, I don't get on really tall, steep roofs.
Nope.
You know why? Because I'm afraid I'm going to fall off of those things,
Yep.
right? And I can't. I at that point in time don't. I'm not a good inspector,
Right.
but I can't promise Andrew's going to have a job every day, 40 hours a week. I can't commit to that because
Right.
I don't have that volume of work, right?
Right.
So I outsource that kind of thing, right? And I think what I'm driving at is whether or not I can't just throw everything at Andrew, though.
Correct. Yeah, there's I don't know if you've ever read the book Traction, but in there they talk about making sure the right butts are in the right seats.
Right.
So even though you may look at a function or you may have give it a title or something, does that person fit in that seat? And one way to kind of gauge that and determine that is, and this is again, I hate to use the military, but this is something we do really, really well,
Use it.
is
I think it applies. I think it's
is
important.
personnel counseling every quarter. So every quarter you sit down with each one of your people that are
That's a
directly below you.
sequencing thing. Yeah,
Yes.
it's kind of a sequencing
So
thing.
every quarter you
And a
sit down with
cadence. Yeah.
you sit down with them and you go over, it's like a performance evaluation. You say, here's how you've done this quarter. Here's all the great things that you did. And then, you in fact, Patrick Bet Davis just talked about this in one of his podcasts, and it's directly from the Army's quarterly counseling statement. You do, doesn't meet, expectations, almost meets expectations, exceeds expectations. So you kind of got a scale, and then you
Mhm.
give different metrics you want to measure, person's ethics, person's technical ability or whatever, and you score them each quarter. And that way you show how they've either progressed or maybe they started falling off, but that gives you opportunity to use the data to identify there's a change here. Why? There's either change for the better. Hey, let's give them a bonus or something like that, or hey, they're starting to slip, let's find out why. That's what that counseling session's for. And then it's not just, even for the folks that are doing horrible, it's not just you saying, oh, you're doing horrible, but there's a part on that counseling statement where you as the leader have to put together a plan for the next 90 days to rehabilitate that person. And then and only then do you either fire or move. So that gives you as the leader an opportunity to say, here's how I'm going to help you. It's not just that I'm, negative Nancy and putting you down. It's my duty to rehabilitate you and get you back on track. And if you can't, maybe you're not in the right seat. We just need to, and then they're happy and they're super productive.
How common do you think that that is the thing that's getting ignored that shouldn't be ignored? How common do you think
It's,
that is?
I don't know. I'm sure I now really want to look for a study. That's a great question. I don't know, from what I've experienced, I think it's pretty common. Or what you see is people have been in the same seat for too long.
Hmm.
And because there's, in certain industries, there's just not a whole lot of room for upward mobility, or different areas of skill. It's pretty straight. Like I kind of almost look at public adjusting like that, right?
Uh-huh.
I mean, you're an adjuster. Is an adjuster is an adjuster is adjuster. There's
Right.
not
Yeah.
really a
There's not
whole
a lot
lot
of a
of
food chain. There's not
it's
much of a food chain there, right?
right. You got field and desk. I mean,
Yeah.
that's about it. So I think in some organizations, depending on what type of business it is, some leaving someone in the seat for too long can also
Uh-huh.
be detrimental.
Well, I think that can just in general be bad for morale.
Exactly. 100% it can
You
be.
know, I
Hmm.
think it just can be bad for morale. I think some level of change or variety is
Right.
good.
Right.
I think that that's really really important.
But I think there's that saying that says hire slow, fire fast,
Yeah.
which I do think that that's very, very valid in most cases. I think if somebody already just has a terrible, terrible attitude, culturally, they just don't fit,
Well,
I think that's a great rule of
I don't
thumb.
think you can fix culture problems. I think you can only curate
Right.
culture.
But if a person seems like, no, they fit in this culture
Uh-huh.
and they're definitely capable, maybe we've just got them in the wrong seat. Instead of
Right.
firing so fast, let's look at maybe moving them to a
How
different
do you
position.
differentiate between that? I mean, when do you sort of identify the difference between being in the wrong seat and a bad attitude, so to speak?
That quarterly counseling session is what helps.
Uh-huh.
Because if you're, especially once you're at the executive level, you're all over the place, all over the place. Well, you should be. Anyway, you should be all over the place, checking everything. Um, but that slowing down once a quarter, because it gives you a framework or a history of behavior to bring to the table, discuss and have open dialogue, put together the plan, and see what happens the next 90 days. If after that next 90 days, there's no improvement, perfect. Now you have documentation, which is the other piece, right? As a leader, you've at least got documentation. It doesn't feel personal. It doesn't, in other words, it doesn't
Mhm.
feel like it prevents cronyism and some of those things that
Sure,
happen.
I can see that.
So,
I can see that.
and the other thing is part of the
I think it is it possible. Let me just kind of insert this question because I think it's important. How often do you think that people are looking at, you know, I've got a small organization and I feel like I know what's going on with everybody, so I haven't bothered to ask. Is that
Yep.
an error that you run
Yes.
into?
All the time.
And how does somebody discover that's what's going I mean, you may not want to discover that, but how do you uncover something along those lines?
You'll just hear it amongst the rest of the employees of the company.
Oh
Do you
yeah.
know what's going on? Man, I don't know what's going on. I got this message like 5 minutes ago. I didn't even know. Like
Right.
it's that chaos of nobody knowing what they're supposed to be doing the next day because the current day is still so chaotic. It should never be like that. By Monday morning or Tuesday, whichever is the best day to have that company meeting, it's everybody should be calibrated and the rest of the week they know what they're supposed to do. There's no micromanagement.
I think I would drift towards having it on Monday. You know what I'm saying? But maybe why is that not a good idea? What are
So
the reasons possibly for doing it at a different time?
so what I have found, Tuesday is a great day. Monday, I call Mondays whack-a-mole Monday. Like, the little thing where you just
That's what it
freaking,
is.
it's
Yeah,
all you're doing on
I love
Monday.
that. I love
It,
that
you're
analogy.
just,
Yeah.
this is that you're doing good just to do that. So nobody's able to really stop and think. And again, when you have the meeting, each of those people are supposed to bring pieces of information to the table
Hmm.
so that everybody knows what's going on left and right. And then you synchronize everybody on Tuesday and the rest of the week they're going. Yep, I know what I'm supposed to be doing. See you until next week.
I think that's kind of microcosmic of kind of where I'm headed, just in general. Let me ask you this. Do you think that operation kind of has to be bespoke to the visionary or the founder, or do you think the founder should come in and find a structure that he works well within?
I think it should be to the visionary. I always
Yeah.
calibrate to the visionary. When I come into an organization, well, the first thing I do right off the bat, I don't change anything for the first 90 days. I'm observing everything everywhere. I'm in every meeting with everybody. And I'm not saying anything. I'm just fly on the wall, taking notes. If there's something that I immediately like, oh, I really want to implement this, or I think this needs to be changed, I'll write it down first and I won't put it into action for a little while because I want to make sure that just because I thought that there's not something else going on somewhere else that if I just paused for a minute, I would figure out the why. And I'm like, oh, okay. Because if you start going in, changing stuff up, it's very
You
chaotic.
start chasing symptoms and you
Yes,
don't really see the actual causation of
correct.
it. Yeah.
But so I do that first. And then while I'm doing that, I'm studying how does the visionary like to receive information? Are they more verbal?
Hmm.
Do they like text? Do they like emails? Do they just want one roll up at the end of the day? Like, how does the visionary receive information? When? Okay. Because sometimes people are like, I want it first thing in the morning. Sometimes people are like, nope, give it to me at the end of the week. Or just tailoring the tempo and everything to the visionary. But to do that, you have to know your visionary.
Right. Okay. So, what should be standardized then?
The cadence, for sure. The cadence absolutely
You,
has to
you
be
just, I
standardized.
mean, do you just
And
come in and
here's
lay that out at the beginning?
yes, here's
Like, this
why.
is how we're going to do it. This is when meetings happens. This is what we're going to
Yep.
do on Monday. Okay.
Yes, and the reason for that is because then everybody it's predictable for everybody. There is no excuse why nobody can show up unless, you're in a hospital or whatever. I mean, there's human circumstances, but it is absolutely critical to do. Everybody else's schedule can work around it. If you know Monday at 9 a.m. you're going to be in a meeting for 1 hour or 30 minutes, whatever it is, then you can always plan everything else around it. What shouldn't be standardized are those things that maybe require a little more creativity, a little more in fact, because you establish SOPs, right? Standard operating procedures when
Yeah.
you do operations. But there are certain things that just are a little more require a little more creative input.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
don't standardize
Well,
that.
that goes back to the fluidity of
Yes.
things. Some things do need to be
Like I'm not going to micromanage.
well, we don't know yet. Some of it is you need to still gather intelligence, right? I
Yeah.
mean, does that go back to sort of like we may need to do some scientific method here and
Yes.
see what our results are.
Correct.
That kind of thing.
Yep.
Do you start with something? So it's hard to give you any sort of anecdote or analogy, but are there things that you try to look obviously you don't want large scale things to necessarily be fluid. That's not really what I mean.
Right.
Do you try to be more broad in your approach on the fluidity, or they're looking at sort of symptomatic things that could be microcosmic
I would say
of the issue?
Yeah, definitely the microcosmic.
You
So
work with the symptom just to kind of see if it's
Yeah.
a microcosm of the
it's
bigger
kind of
deal.
like a what I call bottom up refinement.
Uh-huh.
So boss puts out the plan, right?
Right.
Your big OKRs, right?
Yeah.
But then inside each quarter and maybe even each week, the staff kind of has their KPIs. I don't know if you've heard that one next,
Yeah,
right?
I know that one. Yeah.
Key performance indicators. Yep.
Yes, I know that
So
one.
you're looking at your KPIs to make sure you're on track with the boss's OKRs,
Uh-huh.
right? Those big objectives. If you are, great. If you're not, calibrate. So I wouldn't say KPIs themselves should be standardized, but having them should also be standardized. Absolutely standard. So you've got your cadence and you've got the existence of KPIs. Because if people don't know what to measure that's going to feed up, then they're just willy-nilly in it. But
Right.
if it can be measured, then they know how to adjust, like you said, at the micro level
Right.
without being micromanaged. They just look at the chart or, I like visuals. So like you have an annual plan on a big chart that everybody can look at, and then you've got the quarterly. But then in each directorate or whatnot, they might have their monthly posted somewhere, or maybe their weekly. That the weekly definitely gets covered in the weekly meeting. Okay, this week, these are the things we need to measure, or these are the things we need to achieve, that can be measured in order to make sure we're on track for the month. Those monthlies need to make sure we're on track with the quarter. The quarterly is on track with the annual. See what I'm
Right.
saying?
So what do you do when you run into a founder that has that tends towards the micromanagerial
Ooh,
kind of, and
that's
usually
tough.
because there's a lot of reasons to micromanage. One, you're so chaotic you haven't trained anybody on how to do it, so you feel like you have to stand over and make sure they do it right. And then there's some where you just don't have any trust in your people, all of those kinds of things. When you
Yeah.
run into a managerial culture, so to speak, how do you start fixing on those kinds of things without breaking hearts? You know what I mean?
It depends on the relationship with the CEO. For me, anyway. I will say that some people will say all day long they want a COO. They want that second in command. They want that somebody to go execute.
Sure, everybody, yeah.
And then they get one in and they're like, whoa. All of a sudden you start making them uncomfortable unintentionally. But now the ego comes in, and now I've built this, I've had it for 5 years before you, who are you to, it's like, so then you don't want a COO.
I think I let me see if I can draw. I've been sitting here racking my brain trying to think of an analogy, and I think I've come up with one.
Okay.
You've got an author that has poured his heart and soul into a book,
Yes.
right? And he hands it over
to
an editor.
Yes.
And
The
it
editor
turns into,
shreds the
just
shit
shreds
out of
it and redlines it. And it's like, this isn't going to work. And chances are that editor is 1000% right
Yeah.
based on what will sell.
Yes.
Do you understand what this
That's
is
right.
all based on? Because the goal is not to write a book.
Right.
The goal is to sell a book.
That's right.
Right?
That's
That's
right.
the goal. And or sometimes those goals, and I think it's even better to say that author has the goal to write a book and that's what he's done.
Yeah.
The editor has a goal to sell a book and he's got to take your goal and marry those. And when those feel divergent, right? How do you bring that back in?
I don't have a good answer for that
There's not
because
one. I'm just curious to what
so
you're gonna say. So
this is where I have a sit down and discussion with the CEO and potentially talk about my exit. Because if I'm not the right, what's the word I'm looking for? Vessel.
uh-huh.
If I'm not the right vessel, find the right vessel. Because the CEO, I would say that's the most critical role to jive with the CEO out of any other role. Because if the CEO and the COO aren't 100% in unison, it will trickle down. Everybody will see it. They'll feel it. It'll start to disrupt culture and everything. So if I feel like I won't be able to get through to this person, and
Mhm.
that's okay. That's where that separation from personal and business comes into play. I have been able to do that. I've been able to say this is not personal. This is based on decision. This is what's best for your company.
This is what the intelligence tells me.
Yeah, the intelligence tells me
This is what
I'm the enemy in here.
I'm don't shoot the messenger.
Yeah.
This is just what the intelligence tells me. The information curated and garnered and looked like this. I put this together. This is what the intelligence tells me.
Yeah, when the intelligence tells me just may not be the best fit for this CEO, I'll have that conversation and sooner rather than later. Because here's another thing I would say the number one quality for a COO would be low ego. Let this
Wow,
let the
that's really cool.
let
Yeah,
the
that's
CEO
interesting.
let the CEO have the ego. That's important. Somebody has to. But the COO needs to have a low ego. It does it you can't hurt me. I serve the staff, I serve the CEO, the visionary, and that's it. I keep everything business. It's not personal. I don't have an ego. So for me, it's as soon as I identify I'm not a good fit for this person in this
Mhm.
culture.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's best that I leave sooner rather than later so they can find that other person
And you've
faster.
actually executed that way.
Yes.
Yeah, you've
Yes.
absolutely. That's not just a in theory for
It is
you.
not an in theory. Unfortunately, yes, my resume looks like yeah,
Well, I
because
I wonder I wonder if that's because kind of what my next question is. I don't want to let any cats out of the bag here because I prefer to keep cats in bags where they belong. All my cat lovers out there, I'm
I was
really
gonna say
kidding.
I like the cat in my lap, or
You and I have kind of talked sort of on our own, and I want you to know first and foremost, I think probably one of the greatest roles for you that I've heard of all the things that we've talked about, of all the talents you have, this is certainly one of them. And I think it's a growing need because of the entrepreneurial boom that
yes,
we are absolutely seeing, and that is the role of the fractional COO. Buzzwords aside, I know that that number that word is thrown, that fractional word is being thrown
no,
around all over the place.
yes,
What I think that that's a real fit for you. Do you know what I mean? And I think you see things sort of in silos in ways that most of us, because this becomes our baby,
uh huh,
right? I mean, what shape is a baby,
yeah,
right? But you can bring some clarity and some shape into some organization on that. And if someone brought you like a clear vision in a really messy business, what's the first thing that you want to understand in that situation?
truths versus assumptions. I do not like when other people make decisions based on assumptions. I don't like making decisions based on assumptions either, unless I know that we have gone out and gathered the intelligence as much as possible and we can still,
How do you differentiate between the speculation of it all and the actual intelligence of it all?
I think it's just canvassing your people again. And then I mean, because obviously living and breathing inside CRMs and all of those things, those help with those dashboards, those numbers, right? That those things that are tangible and measurable. But there's always that people element you still have to consider, which is it's uncomfortable. It's so much easier and so much more enjoyable to go after the things that are black and white, numerical and whatever. And then you got this human element over here that's touchy feely, and it's, where I like to go in and say, okay, you're making these decisions, but they're based on these assumptions. Let's not turn
Uh-huh.
them. Let's not go off of assumptions. The number one purpose of intelligence is to turn an assumption into a fact.
Right.
So let's make as many decisions as possible based on as
So
many
that gives you an
facts as
intelligence.
possible.
Yeah. What I mean that
Yes,
puts you out of. I need to go gather this
I
information.
need to go
Yeah,
gather information. And if that's sit with people, I sit with people. If it's in the system, I'll go and get in the system. But eliminate as many assumptions as possible.
how often do you think a founder actually knows what his problems are? Like he comes to you, he's like, I've got this problem, and if you can help me get this thing fixed, that's going to solve everything.
No, and it I don't think it's because they're incapable or anything like that at all. I think it's just they don't have all of the data they need, whether
Hmm.
it's people data
They're using it's all
regular
assumption.
data.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I really think it's not their well, it's kind of their fault because they haven't done that assessment or brought somebody in to assist with that assessment and calibration. But I think that's just
Somebody who owns a business. Let me say this. I'm going to use a really innocuous example: a used car salesman.
okay.
Well, people just assume all used car salesmen are crooks, and that's why I can't make any sales because everybody thinks we're dishonest.
Right.
Right. I mean,
Right.
so there's no intelligence. That's a rash assumption. It's a globalized statement.
Mhm.
All of those things. We can appreciate how wrong that is on a lot of levels.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so you're having to flesh out sort of those what's the word I'm looking limiting belief in a lot of things.
Mhm.
How
Mhm.
often is it you're really wrestling with a limiting belief or a false belief, that maybe they're operating out of fears. We can't do that because this would mean this. I find a lot of times, and not to lose sight of the question here, is people are willing to take a risk to keep from losing something rather than take a risk for an objective gain. I don't mean like better sleep and more clarity kind of gains. I
Right.
mean like actual I weigh less, I feel better, not feel it's not all sort of ethereal. You know what I mean? It becomes something more concrete, measurable, those three things at the end of the year that we look at. Those sorts of measurements. I think a lot of times when a founder runs into something, most of what he thinks is wrong isn't what's wrong. It's usually a much smaller issue that is compounded into something large,
Right.
right? So how do you drill down on those things?
Or it I'll identify that they're just struggling with imposter syndrome.
Oh, well, yeah, that's a lot of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it's oh, I don't want to grow that big and that fast because what if somebody finds out I'm not capable because and I'll use I can't remember if it was your analogy on one of your podcasts or somebody else mentioned, when you open up a restaurant, it's because you love to cook.
Right.
And
Yeah,
then
that's
you
mine. Yeah, I
yeah,
use
yeah,
that
yeah.
I use that a lot. Yeah.
Yes. And then but then you have to switch to running a business
Yeah, that sucks.
and then you're like, "Oh, I'm not doing I'm not oh, now I got and so they don't know what those problems are because they haven't been operating at that, 50,000-foot level.
Uh-huh.
And if you don't have anybody that's your right hand helping you collect that information and feed it to you, it's the other crooks, right? CEO needs to be getting out of the business to bring business in. Your COO works in the business.
Mhm.
But if you don't have that that second hand, and look for small business, obviously they can't justify the expense of a full blown COO. You can have that just call them a second in command. It doesn't have to be the title COO or whatever, but you have to have that person that's only working on the inside, and then
Yep.
you as the founder work on the outside.
Yep.
Let that person tell you what the problems are from inside, and you say,
Ooh,
"Here's
boy,
the
that's
problems from the
scary.
outside."
That's scary. But you're realizing a gain of an organized business in the
Yes.
middle of that if you just like trust
Yep.
that not everything has to be your idea.
Right. And that's where a lot of people, like I said, they think they need a COO, and then they get one, and then they're very uncomfortable. And then you
It
get sidelined, you get gaslit, you get fired. I mean, all sorts of
yeah,
things.
right.
But one of the things I wanted to talk about, I don't know if your audience is familiar with what a fractional COO is.
Well, go ahead and explain that. Yeah.
So,
It's
because
very buzzy right
it's
now. And
it's
so
relatively new.
yeah.
I don't quote me on the number of years, but I know it really started to blow up during COVID. So, fractional COO means you're just devoting part-time type of hours and effort to a company, especially small or startups where maybe a startup doesn't want to give a bunch of equity away or whatever.
Right.
They can just bring in a fractional COO to help get things started at a part-time level.
Establish a cadence.
Right. And
I think
establish the cadence,
uh-huh.
guide the team or whatever.
I love that's really kind of what you do is establish that cadence.
Yep.
I mean, that is something as a visionary I have never considered as important, right? Like in the decision making process,
Yeah.
right? Things are broken because I let cadence establish itself. Let's let it find a rhythm is sort of my default value there.
Right.
And what a grand error that is.
Yes. And a lot of founders do that. A lot. They just don't think it's necessary. We'll figure it out. We'll have meetings when we just feel like we need
Well,
to.
it's out of a heart to let culture develop.
Right.
You know, and so just because it's intended, what your intention there is, that is not necessarily functional. I think is really important.
Hmm.
You know,
And,
so
and I think the other thing is, I imagine if I'm in your audience's shoes, they're asking, well, what's the difference between a consultant? Because that sounds like a consultant. You come in and you
the
just
problem
help and
is
you can.
they that word is overused.
Well, but the difference between a consultant and a fractional COO in my brain is the consultant can just come in and guide you, give you tips and tricks, best practices, and things like that.
Right.
Fractional COO still has to live and breathe inside your company. So and this is where it also makes people uncomfortable. You still have to let them into your company, see your books, see your systems, look
Hmm.
at all your organization and your files, metrics, and your how are people disseminating information. And so that kind of makes people a little uncomfortable. It's like, well, you're part-time, but I'm giving you keys to the kingdom. Kind of, you
Yeah.
see what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Right. Yeah.
so it still makes people a little uncomfortable, but you can pay this person. Maybe you only need them 10 hours a week. Maybe you need them for 20 hours a week. And you can work out, some do hourly, some will do a really small base pay with a percent of, revenue, which I think is the best because then it also kind of proves to the CEO the worth.
Hmm.
Hey, I have a vested interest in making this grow, even though I'm just part-time. And then it gives a startup or a small company opportunity to have executive level leadership without killing the business before it has a chance to get off the ground. From a financial standpoint.
Well, right, because you may not, it allows them to come in and function in the role because I think in any full-time job, there's an amount of downtime.
Yes.
Right. And when you're not dealing with a lot of people, right, or a lot of
Yes.
volume,
Yes.
right,
Yes.
especially in a startup situation,
Mm-hmm.
it allows you to establish some things without the financial commitment of a
Yes.
full-time qualified person,
Yep.
right? You can't get anybody qualified because nobody wants to do that. So if you're wanting to establish yourself, because some of the people out there may be really good operational people,
Oh yeah.
so how would that guy that wants to break into being the fractional COO kind of person in that offering, what do you think are some of the first things that they really need to do to look at doing that?
What do you mean? Like
Well,
rephrase
okay,
the
so for
question.
example, if you're out there and you're trying to look for COO jobs or operational effort jobs, that operations expert job, right? Okay, maybe the job is available, maybe it's not available. Maybe you're tired of working for the man, and you would like to create a business around being someone's second in command. Do you
I
see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I
Like,
think I think the best way to go about doing that is word of mouth
uh huh,
because you're already going to know which CEOs you're most likely to jive with and not jive with. And I think
right.
that eliminates the job hopping part. Going to the same conferences, going to the same courses, going to the same that kind of thing. You'll kind of know. And then yeah, then because then you're already trusting of the other person.
Right.
And
Right.
you've kind of gone through the whole,
Yeah.
almost like that first 90-day period, just
Right.
kind of like, all
Right.
right,
I think a lot of
speeds it up a
I
little.
think a lot of founders kind of find themselves in despair because now the pain to change is less than the pain to stay the same, so
Hmm.
to speak, right? And I think that that's where that fractional COO can come in. I have talked to a couple throughout my business ventures,
Hmm.
and I'm going to tell the audience it's not as much money as you think it is,
Right.
and it is
That's
a
right.
lot more than it's a lot more money that you're looking to save and realize gains. So
Oh,
I
yeah.
want to encourage you, if you are thinking about that or you've had the inclination that you need a fractional COO, then you probably do, and at least have a conversation with them and let them convince you that you can't afford them. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
I at least have the conversation. Let me ask you one last question before we go here, okay? Right? What is the one question that good operators keep asking that founders never think to ask?
When does a priority not become a priority anymore because something else took priority instead of everything being a priority? Like you have
Or
to,
maybe the project's done.
right. Yeah. What is, yeah. Yeah. What is,
We've
yeah.
solved the problem.
We've
Quit
solved
making
the
it a
problem.
problem.
Don't make it more than it is, or what's that other adage or that old saying? Don't break something if it works.
Yeah.
Or
If it ain't
don't try,
broke,
if
if
it
it
ain't
ain't
broke,
broke,
don't
don't
fix.
fix it.
Thank you. Good
There you go.
Lord. I was going to get there eventually. Yeah. You look at how many people do that. It's like, why would you put all this resource, effort, energy into something that's not broken? Find something that's broken. That goes back to the whole, have you framed the problem correctly? Because focusing on a solution because you saw some shiny object, whiz bang, cool guy thing.
That
I
is
look, I'm just as
that is going to
guilty.
be the end of me.
Yes.
I promise. Oh my, the whiz bang thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh no. Same. Same.
Yeah.
Same. And it's like, hey, yeah, that's cool, but that doesn't solve the problem I need to solve. I'm not gonna go create a problem just so I can use that solution.
This has been the Undeniable Podcast with Jessica Odell, the fractional COO. If you want to know who she is, make sure you get in contact with her. We're going to have all of her contact information. So if you're interested in fractional COO things, you can certainly get a hold of her and she can help get you moving in that direction. I'm reminding you guys, own your own story or somebody else will.